Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Downtown Eastside Heart of the City Festival and to this really special event with Sharon Kallis and Martin Borden, two folks that I've known in this community for a long, long time, wonderful artists, and I'm so excited to do this project, to do this event with them today. My name is Terry Hunter, and I'm the Executive Director of Vancouver Moving Theatre and the artistic producer of the Downtown Eastside Heart of the City Festival. And I also carry the name Nangulga, which in Haida means industrious one. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to this event, to welcome you to these artists, and to also acknowledge that we are on the unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. And this is a real special event because being on their territory and the work that Sharon does, working with the indigenous plants of this land, and all the work that goes on in that area of connecting to the natural habitat and the indigenous plants of this territory, and working with the First Nations people of this land. Work that we're all doing very strongly here on the Downtown East Side. Welcome, Sharon, and welcome, Martin, to the Heart of the City Festival and to doing this event, Wildfibres Clothing from Undomesticated.
Thank you, Terry. Yeah, it's lovely to be here. Martin and I have been working together for so many years now, and it was just, it's strange times having been filming through the pandemic. And how to sort of do a release for the film. So this was just like a perfect opportunity.
I'm really looking forward to seeing it. I haven't seen it. And welcome, Martin. You and I worked together. I don't know, Martin, was it like almost 30 years ago? You were, I think, artist in resident at the Strathcona Community Center, and you did this really beautiful project where you photographed people in the community, and then you put on this wonderful permanent exhibit in the hallway of the Strathcona Community Center, which I have to say, I'm very sad to hear, has been taken down.
Yeah, I know. They actually didn't even tell me. I just went in one day and it was gone. So
I'm going to have to walk in the... Well, I don't know about that. I'm going to walk in the Strathcona Community Center and express my unhappiness about the removal of that really beautiful project that you did. Sharon and Martin, if you guys could set this video up for us and tell us the length, and then once it's set up, we're going to come back and have a Q&A. I'll certainly have lots of questions, and for those folks who are online, you can participate by typing in your questions into the chat function on the side. Sharon and Martin, set this up for us.
Martin, you go ahead.
Okay. Well, it's a 20-minute video. Sharon and I have been working together for about 10 years now. And she asks me periodically to document the projects that she's working on. And this one was particularly good because it was about making an item of clothing right from beginning to end, completely using plants that are growing right in the area, which Sharon can do a much better job of explaining to you. But it involved me going and visiting probably once a week sometimes. It's very close to where I live, so all the transportation was done on bicycle. And I just got swept away by the whole activity that Sharon had launched into. And she's going to explain that in the film. And it took, what was the duration, I guess, at the time?
I think it's 2 years, basically, of kind of growing, and then the harvesting, processing, and making covers 2 years worth of a nettle growing. So 2 seasons worth of growth.
All condensed down into 20 minutes.
Amazing, amazing. And Sharon, the coat in the back, is that of significance?
That is of significance. It's kind of, yes, you're having a bit of a reveal that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I had a cloth over it beforehand. But yes, this is a nettle coat.
All right. Okay. So without further ado, let's take in your video, and we'll see you on the other side.
All right. So this is a unplanned harvest of the fireweed that has been trammeled by somebody coming through the middle of the garden beds. What we're going to do is just cut the stalks on the ground, and I'll take the leaves off and put them in water so we've got them for some natural dye, like some botanical prints. So this is a raised bed full of fiber plants as well as tea plants at Trillium Park. We've got this long tradition as humans of clothing ourselves with plants, so it's really exciting to just broaden what can be a fiber plant and shift our thinking. Trillium is a park that was designed to have artists involved somehow, and I was lucky to be involved in the design process. We have plantings here intentionally chosen for traditional hand technologies, as well as our shipping containers and work bays as enclosed studio space for holding classes and for storing all of the materials and all the tools and everything. So one of the things we're doing is exploring a whole variety of wild fibers, from fireweed to the dogbane or Indian hemp to milkweed, stinging nettle. We've grown flax, which is a early agricultural crop for textiles. This is the nettle plant. The research that I've done with community here has been around how the green stalks were processed by the Coast Salish ancestors for fish nets, and also processed in different ways for clothing. So one of the things I love about it is that it's this plant that's a culture connector and connects my ancestors to the ancestors of the place I live. Nicola and I just harvested the nettle that is going to be used for a project I'm working on, 2 different tops or shirts that explore different ways of working with the nettle fiber. One way is when the fiber is what's called retted, which is a controlled rot. So these are just green nettle stalks that the leaves and the seeds were stripped off of. This is going to ret the nettle for probably the next 4 days. The other process is harvesting what I call green nettle, and you're stripping the fiber off of the stalks while they are still fresh. I like to walk the branches to crack the nodes. Once they're stomped, I can just crack them open and slide the fiber off the outside. This is the green fiber that has not been retted. You can hear it, it's super crunchy. You can also just kind of feel the texture of it. It's very different from the nettle fiber that has been retted and then stripped off of the stalks. This is dogbane. It's also sometimes called Indian hemp, and the fiber comes from a fluff in the seed pod, as well as a beautiful long red fiber that comes from the stalk. This is common milkweed, Asclepias. We'll get big seed pods with lovely silky fiber inside and beautiful silky fiber in the stalk.
What I've learned so far is the milkweed actually just comes off better when it is fresh and end of season after a cold snap. We're taking the milkweed and taking the fiber off the same way as we've done for the dogbane and the nettle. Some of these are starting to pop now. So what I can do is just run my finger down that as soon as I get it open to slide all of those out like that. So I've got this little bit of milkweed tow in here, and I'm gonna put some of that fluff from the seed of the dogbane in there. Now I'm gonna just roll that up. Oh, that's pretty good. I'm applying 2 different nettle drop spindles together, and one of them is a much tighter twist. That's my line nettle, and the other is much softer. And I'm adding water because that helps just get some of the woolly ends tamed down in place. Technically, I started this shirt in terms of processing some of these fibers probably about a year ago. I've wanted to have a nettle shirt since 2002 when I first started kind of experimenting and learning about nettle. And I was always saying nettle shirt 2020 as a joke, and here it is 2020. So I'm just trying to get a sense of what this might look like and then what my next step is going to be. I think what I'll end up doing is casting on the side here, just below that stripe actually becomes a nice point. Good. So I'm just getting all of these fibers lined up and organized by rolling them on my thigh. It's kind of the biggest challenge. If you can do a 3-strand braid, as long as you can coordinate your fingers on holding all of the pieces, you can up that 3-strand to as many as you want. And of course, nettle is my favorite fiber. It tells such a story about relationship to place and is one of those fibers that grows all over the Northern Hemisphere. For me, being settler descent, living on Coast Salish land, it has been really a key part for me of how I've connected to this place, as well as giving me kind of a common bond and connection with local nations, skill holders and knowledge holders that I've been able to work with. There's lots of similarities, but there's also lots of differences in how the nettle has been processed, depending on what kind of the end results were that you were wanting, whether you were making a fishing net versus making a sweater. And so this braiding and processing method I'm doing is kind of a hybrid of the different methods I've learned. I'm getting the crochet hook to just pull through some new fiber. So that's how the sides have come in and then joined to weave in to this back braid. And I'm just kind of filling in these back components now and the arm. I think it was last August that I started very specifically processing the nettle. And so I've had a year of processing and knitting at all kinds of different places. Halfway through the project, the pandemic hit. Community-based programming has obviously looked really different through the pandemic, figuring out how to do things in really small groups. We've done a few online sessions of having some online weaving time. So what you can do is clip off any of the branches with leaves that are kind of splaying out.
Okay.
Yep, perfect, right where they're hitting the main branch. When we think about where our clothing comes from, it's usually coming from a long way away. The footprint is huge for a garment by the time you're purchasing it and putting it on your back. This is primarily from a spot 15 feet from where I'm sitting now. In the wintertime, because of the COVID lockdown, we couldn't meet, and that was when David Goman, my husband, was kind enough to build me a warp-weighted loom, which is a style of loom my ancestors would have been using in Scotland, and I began weaving the fabric that became the sleeves. So I'm stitching in the sleeves. And the vest has been scoured and then pounded, so it's much softer, believe it or not, but it's also got this mobility and this movement to it now that it didn't have so much before. What I find really fascinating is how this notion of zero waste design, where I'm using every piece of the cloth, and when I look at this now and I look at how these arms that were just one piece cut in half, and when I look at how those very naturally shape and become sleeves, it's almost like uncovering the origin story of where this piece of design comes from. So this is late spring of 2021. I started the nettle coat well over a year ago, and I've just finally got enough threads processed and spun again to start warping up what's going to be the third and final piece. So this piece of cloth that I'm making is going to be about 3 meters long, about 13 inches wide, and that's going to become the hood and the front panel on the coat. This is the 4th time I've warped this loom now, and every time I'm learning so much about the process of weaving and of working with hand-spun threads for cloth towards garment construction. And I'm still making stupid novice mistakes, but I hopefully learn from them and don't repeat them. And it just feels like the best way possible to be learning is just each step, each piece. There's new things that come into clarity of why they're done a particular way. So when I've got the coat on, it is very crispy in the areas around the sleeve and armpit for wearing. And I thought I would just see what it was like if I could do some beetling of this cloth in around the arms and see if that will soften it up a little bit. So this is the final component of the coat before I get to the stitching and design work. The nettle cloth is so springy and bouncy compared to linen. It's been really fascinating to see how different the cloth properties are. So today is the day for the buttons. This was pair number 3 that I made, and they're made with the waist warp. So this is about 5 stalks of dogbane that I drop spindled, and I'm just waxing now to use for my buttonholes. Fast fashion is this notion that we all deserve the privilege to buy new things and wear new things, to just pop into a shop and pick up something new every week. And every week there's new fashions coming out. And there's no concept that garments can last. There's no connection to the resources that have been used and the human labor that has gone into the production of those garments. Right from the beginning, I was intrigued with the notion of how I could make a garment with nettle with as few skills and tools as possible. And in answering that, it actually has led me to push my own skill development to the point of working on a loom and spinning my nettle fibers on my wheel and pushing my thread production and craftsmanship to the next level. I'm wetting the coat because I want it to take the form of my body in its final dried shape. I'm also aware as I move that I can really just shape it and shift the braid and open up the seams a little bit and get the form where it's going to be finally resting. Clothing myself now feels like both a really simple, small thing that I can be doing in a world that is in crisis. It also feels unbelievably radical. We should be able to clothe ourselves. We should be able to feed ourselves and make our own shelter. There's been so many community members that are connected to this, so many individuals that have taught me or learned alongside me, and I know them. I have that relationship to the people, I have that relationship to the places, to the land, and knowledge of working with the plants. And these are really and truly both collaborations with nettle.
Welcome back, everyone. Oh my gosh, that was completely and totally fascinating. I have so many questions. All about your learning, Sharon, about all the stuff that you've learned over time. Like, how did you develop all those skills? I want to go there. But first, I think I want to go to Martin. Martin, you made this beautiful film over a 10-year period, and tell us about that experience of making a 2-year period. I thought it was a 10-year period, a 2-year period. So tell us about that experience of doing this and being around the process and what you learned, and any reflections on this process that Sharon is going through.
Yeah, the confusion is we've been making films together for 10 years, but this particular film was, I had forgotten actually, it was 2 years. A couple summer times went by, a couple of winters. I look at it and I just think of some of the things that occur to me is right where this takes place is right next to where they're building a new hospital. And it's incredibly inner city, and it's very, very noisy. So how often I had to restart doing the sound because Sharon would be saying something beautifully eloquent and some huge crash would come from one of the warehouses, or a saw would start going. For me, it was really interesting to watch this process. I'm interested as a filmmaker to depict things where people are using skills that kind of remind us of where we came from. And I guess my big thing is people that are doing stuff that's got nothing to do with consumerism or with Hollywood, which I think are two big institutions that have stolen our culture from us. So to visit, on this regular basis and see how this very slow, very thoughtful process was taking place. I have to throw in one. I got this story wrong the last time I told it, but right at the beginning of the film, I have to say Sharon is very well dressed and always has an interesting choice in clothing, especially the stuff she makes. But there's a moment early in the film where she is wearing the most god-awful checked shirt, and it's actually my shirt. Because, it says something about my taste, because it was a point in the film where the shirt, the knit shirt was already made and she was wearing it, but it was too early in film terms to reveal it. So I asked, have you got something else that you can put on? Because I'm going to be filming you and it's going to put that too early in the film. And it was a hot day and all I had was that shirt. So my nasty, sweaty shirt went on the brave subject of this film, and I have to apologize for you having to be seen in public wearing that ugly shirt.
Totally rocked it. I love that shirt. I rolled the sleeves up. I had my woven hat on. It absolutely looks like it was my shirt. But the thing that I was disappointed in Martin finishing the film. So we had kind of two sections that were done. The first section, and then there was a bit of a hiatus, and that was kind of when the grant funding, and I needed to do a final report, and we submitted that, and then the loom build and continuation happened. And so Martin had in the first part of the film that he had put forward, there was this beautiful clip where he revealed himself, which has been the thing that I keep saying to Martin. He is such a big part of my collaboration. He's even built a lot of the equipment that we use in our flax break has been built, and all this other, Martin's so enmeshed in this work. I was like, I want you to be in this documentary with me. And so there was this beautiful scene where I had just tried on the nettle tank top, and I'm looking at myself in a mirror in my studio, and Martin kind of pans up and you see him behind the camera over my shoulder, and he was wearing that shirt. So for anyone in the know, funny moment. But just anyway, I think it speaks to our kind of commitment and comfortable relationship of working together, and it's just been such a joy to have Martin as kind of my longest ongoing collaborator, other than my life partner, for somebody that I just give full, Martin, I'm doing this thing and I know you'll do a beautiful job documenting it. And as an artist, I just give Martin free rein to kind of do the storytelling however he sees fit.
It's one thing I have to say too, it's really nice to see the other people, because there's little cameos by Carmen Rosine shows up in there.
Oh, I didn't see her.
Yeah, and quite a few people that are really mainstays to what Sharon does. Yeah. And they step in and out of the story. So it's nice that a lot of it was because of COVID that we had to restrict how many people were around and the distance between us. And I couldn't go in Sharon's place for a long time. So we had to kind of stage a few things in ways that we probably wouldn't normally have had to do. But
I'm just going to give you, we have a comment from Zarina Lobo.
Hey, Zarina.
Yeah,
Serena.
stunning film, Martin, and a beautiful coat, Sharon. I've certainly loved seeing parts of it being made over the last 2 years.
Awesome.
So you guys know
We
Zarina.
know Serena. Yeah. In fact, I think Serena is in there.
Yeah, she's in the dog bane sequence and
Yes,
in
yeah,
the field house.
Yeah, a couple of scenes. Zarina's been a participator in programs with us and actually teaches programs with EarthHand now, teaches some of our dye programs.
And that was one of the things that was fascinating to me about the process was the people that were involved and how you're connecting to community in terms of growing the plants and harvesting them and their involvement in the code itself. A code of many participants. I mean, clearly you were, unless I got it wrong, but clearly you were the lead in pulling together, but that there was many hands that were also helping you.
Most of the fiber work, so I had other hands help on some of the harvesting, but a lot of those videos that are intercut, like when we're in the McLean Park field house and we're doing fiber processing investigations, a lot of that is the workshops and the community events that we do around showing people how to process. And so that's the kind of work that I've been doing and where I've been learning from the plants as my primary teacher, really, and then lots of other people with me on that learning journey, where we've been learning together and doing the fiber processing. But the concept of getting to an actual finished product has been this, like, an object that was wearable has been this this kind of unicorn we haven't been able to achieve. And I was thinking about this earlier. Martin filmed the Urban Cloth project for us back in 2015 that I was doing with Tracy Williams and Mireille Rosner. And, that was called the Urban Cloth Project, but we never got to cloth. And Martin kept saying all the way through as he was getting all this footage of us processing and making, and he was like, at some point, I need the object at the end. Like, we have to get to the object. It's taken really this many years for me to just even have the skills at enough of a capacity to do all of the spinning required. It's like a few kilometers at least worth of spun line.
Oh my gosh.
Probably, if I were to think about it, it's probably about, and everything is plied, so I've spun twice as much. So there's probably like 5 kilometers of spun nettle.
Oh my gosh.
For the coat. And then the sleeves the warp is the linen that we grew at McLean Park. So it's like even just having your skill at a solid enough level that you can do enough production for the weaving has taken me easily probably a decade, but then the physical making has been 2 years.
And that was one of the things that really interested me as I was watching this, because I knew obviously that I was watching really, really old techniques that go back hundreds and hundreds of years. So I wanted to know more about the history of this work and, historically, how long is this kind of fiber work and development of clothing being done by humans? Which is probably a very, very big question.
Yeah.
And the other part was like, where and how did you study and develop the skills to do this work? Because there's so many different layers and the knowledge that you'd have to gain. Can you break that down for us and give us some more insight?
So when I think about where my skills come from, I grew up, my mom was a seamstress. My grandmother was a knitter. So I grew up with the notion of making our own clothes was something still done in my house growing up. Not all of our clothes, but then when I went into high school, I was going into a high school that was very kind of preppy. There was a lot of wealthy kids that were at that school, and I was very label conscious. It was that era in the 80s where suddenly everything had labels on the outside, and I became very aware of how we were socially marked by what we chose to wear, and wanting to step outside of that. And my mom and I designed and she made my kind of going back to school clothes for my first year of high school. And it was this way I'm really aware I was choosing to step outside of all of the different cliques that were present. And I had so many failed efforts at hacking into existing garments and trying to remake them. And that eventually taught me some pattern drafting. I was able to study textiles, and I learned basics of spinning, and I failed miserably at weaving. It was many years later when a friend in the community, Penny Copeland, taught me how to knit, and that brought me back around to spinning. So and then my gardening started when I was in my early 30s and starting to build a relationship to the land and place and understanding a seasonal awareness. So I really can kind of say it's been 35 years that I've had like bits of skill in all of these different areas that have come together in this.
So the work with the fibers of the land and this weaving and what appears to me to be really old techniques. I mean, you know, you're taking plants and you're drying them and pouring water over them and you're doing certain things. Like, where did you learn all these techniques?
So, well, the internet is a wonderful place. There's so much that's online that we can learn from the internet now, but there are a few books. They're not fantastic in terms of being easy to find or having information that's going to be relevant to this environment, to our season. But you know, there's some core things like when I talked about fabric being retted, there's a lot of what I learned about flax processing for linen that translates into nettle. They're very different plants. One is solid, one is hollow stalk, but essentially there's kind of core, the equipment that you can use in some cases is the same, and the kind of life cycle of the plant. So there's lots of crossover of what I'd learned from linen that I could apply to nettle. What I find really interesting, you know, linen is still one of our main plants, but cotton has taken over so much. And now even synthetic polyester is our largest, unfortunately. But stinging nettle throughout Europe. So, you know, there's multiple varieties of stinging nettle across the Northern Hemisphere. They all have textile connections. They're all plants that have been used in textiles forever by the people who lived in their area. And they, in Europe and the UK, they refer to nettle as being a green ruin indicator because it grows where cemeteries are and it grows on midden piles. So it's often a plant you can identify past civilization or past communities have existed. And you know, that's true here. Everett Crowley, our old Everett Crowley Park, our old garbage dump is one of the best places to find nettle growing now. But it also is referred to as the clothing of the landless, because if you were attached to a piece of land, you would typically be wearing wool or linen. You would have access to linen. Flax is a very short crop. It takes 100 days from growing to harvesting. And within a linen crop, you would have what's called line, which is a really long fiber that gives you your very strong, beautiful linen. And then there's a much shorter byproduct called tow, which can be quite itchy to wear. That's what peasants would wear. The people who were sharecroppers on the land, slaves, anybody who was not of royalty or kind of high mercantile class would be wearing that type of linen. But if you weren't attached to a piece of land, if you weren't even a sharecropper or somebody that was kind of connected to a specific place, you would probably be gathering nettles in the season as you traveled. And so nettle became known as the clothing of the landless.
Wow, that's fascinating. And are we talking 100,000 years in terms of the time scale? What's the historical record of?
So flax, to kind of, and I'm always really lousy at timelines and historical dates, but basically flax is what's thought of as one of our founding agricultural crops. So it's in there with wheat. So we're looking at 9,000 to 10,000 years. Nettle would have been worn 10,000 years ago, absolutely. And before that, you know, when we look at kind of spinning technology and how fibers were being twisted together, they would be twisted together and kind of finger twisted, or cordage. Rope making is technology that is at least 40,000, probably 100,000 years old. And that predates the drop spindle, which is about 7,000 years old. And then the spinning wheel is about 600 years old.
Spinning wheel is only 600 years old.
Spinning wheel is only about 600 years old. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I think it was like around 1300 in China, and then it came into England in like 1350 to 1450, around there. And you know, when you look at textiles, it's so connected in to how we have connected to land, and how we have clothed ourselves is so connected into how we have treated those that are clothing us. You know, and so when we start to unpack notions of colonization and notions of relationship to place and relationship to people and abuse of workers, and wanting cheap, you know, wanting that $5 Walmart t-shirt, that is not a new story. That is a story that is as old as humans clothing themselves. So the timeline that you can unpack of how cloth first started to be taken out of the home and into and industrialized, you know, that's very much a part of the Industrial Revolution. People losing the capacity to have that supplementary income.
Right.
So there's, for me, it just feels like such an active kind of taking back my own power in giving myself the skills to clothe myself. And also, it's like back to being that 14-year-old that wants to be not identified as kind of looking in a particular way that anybody is saying, you know, oh, she's wearing Lululemon, you know, she's a soccer mom, or she's a, you know, in her yoga clothes or whatever, like, you know, not having labels on me that are identifiable, not having or the other side of being in super cheap garments that I'm unaware of who the people are that have made them. And I know there's a massive environmental cost to the making of that.
Yeah, and I'm thinking to the CBC report that came out, was it today or yesterday, around this factory in northern China that is using labor that's come over from Korea. And you know, that mass producing of clothing that's really been done at a very slave-like conditions. I think that's the only word I can use.
Yeah, and you know, even with like things that have a label on them that say made with pride in the USA, I don't even trust that, because there's just so much that you will hear around the prison labor and where those relationships are, and so you just, it's so overwhelming to figure out how to step out of that system. That you know. Doing a lot of research and buying less and spending as much money as you can afford to buy for good quality things, and then knowing you're going to mend them, you're going to take care of them, and when you can't mend them anymore, well, what else can you make with that cloth? What's the next thing that cloth can become? So I think the biggie for me in all of this is how much it's changed totally my relationship to the garments that are on my back. Like, you know, my hands are never not busy when I'm sitting at night. I have a mending pile. I'm mending. I'm doing hand stitching. There's always more mending to happen. That's a constant. But having that, you know, it's kind of, you hear the similar conversation of when you eat something that you get from A&W or McDonald's, and it's just like food you're just stuffing in your mouth, and it's not even really food, it's just calories that are going to kind of get you onward, but you're not really thinking about where that food has come from. Relative to if you have a garden plot and you're growing your own tomatoes and your own lettuce, and you are really connected when you sit down and you eat that meal, you're really enjoying all of the flavors and the colors and the textures, and there's that kind of added beauty to the meal because of your lineage and relationship with the food and where it's come from. So yeah,
well said. And I want to come back to that a little bit more. I do remember my grandmother sewing socks. A pair of socks had a hole in them. She sewed them up.
Yeah.
And I don't see that. I mean, my mom doesn't do that. I don't do that. I don't see people sewing up socks. You get a hole in it, I throw it out. And I've also become aware that a couple of years back about synthetic clothing and the damage that comes from these microfibers. So basically petroleum-based clothing. And how that they get into the ocean, they affect affect nature. And so I went into my closet. I decided to have a look at my clothing and how much of my clothing was synthetic. And I was shocked. I had a stack that was this high of shirts and pants and coats and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And recently I bought a beautiful, it was called flannel. And I thought flannel was like a natural product. And I bought this shirt on impulse. I got in the car and I thought, well, I'll have a look at a label. And I looked at it, it was a synthetic product. And it just really, really shocked me. And I've seen, I've been buying blankets for potluck, for ceremonial, activity or the work that we do in our community, in the ceremonies that we do with community. And I remember one day going down to the Army and Navy and to buy blankets. And I would say that 95, 96, 97% of the blankets there were all synthetic. And that really shocked me. Just how much clothing right now is synthetic.
Yeah.
I do want to, people have been leaving comments. See, we got Helen S. says, so well done, Sharon and Martin. What a great documentary.
Thanks, Helen.
Thanks, Ellen.
White Oralet, I don't know if I said that right, says, greetings from Turkey, Istanbul. If that's a friend or somebody who just happens to be.
It's not, but you know what? I posted, so when I say the internet is a wonderful thing, there is a fantastic group on Facebook started by Alan Brown, which is, and a few others, Nettles for Textiles. So there's, I don't know, 15,000 people, I think, that are on that chat. So from all over the world, people are sharing their processing and their learning journeys and asking questions and answering questions.
Nice.
And it's this incredible place for people to be able to share and work together. So thank you for joining us, White Orlet. I wonder if that's how you found us.
And that is one of the benefits of the internet for certain. Kathy Lambert says, we watched in deep fascination because I am midway through the Southern California Fiber Shed Challenge. Make an outfit that is totally made and sourced within the SoCal, which stands for Southern California Fiber Shed. What a project. So there's someone from California. And then she asks, and she says, there are two dumb questions, but Kathy, I'm there with you because I had written these down also. So the two of us have two dumb questions. Do the lovely thumb rings serve a purpose?
Yes, they do. I'm double jointed. And so my thumbs bend beyond what they should bend, and so I can just kind of shift that over, and it holds my thumb from overextending, and I don't tire out my joints as much. So I have a friend who, you can actually buy these, but they're very delicate and thin. And I broke one the first day I had it on my thumb. And so I have a friend who's a jeweler who was kind enough to work with me on designing them. Yeah. My exoskeleton.
And then the next question is from Kathy. It also is on my list. How are these garments in the area of wearing comfort?
So the nettle jersey or tank top that I made is remarkably warm. I'm quite shocked at how thermal it is, what a thermal insulator it is. And I like it. Not everybody would. Some people, and it's partly because of how I've knit it, with my fiber still being a little wild and woolly. So it's slightly scratchy. It's like linen. It's softening more and more as it's washed more often. The nettle here. So this is kind of like crunchy. The green, the darker part is as kind of crunchy as you would imagine it to be. It kind of feels like it could have been armor for bows and arrows. It's definitely got some structural rigidity to it. The nettle cloth itself, like where I've spun it and woven it here, where it's just, almost entirely nettle. The warp is 60 to 70% nettle, and then there's a little bit of linen and a little bit of dog bane and a little bit of hemp in the warp, and then the weft is the cross threads and the warp are the up and down strong threads. The weft is 100% nettle, and it is beautiful, beautiful cloth. It is so soft and bouncy and strong and lustrous. And so my next challenge now, my nettle challenge is nettle pants 2030. So I feel like I definitely
2030.
2030. It's like we work on the slow fashion, Terry. We work on a long extended.
That seems like an extraordinary length of time. 10 years.
So,
and this only took you 2.
I'll just show you because, it's, so these are nettle threads. This is waist loom again, and this was dyed with indigo that I grew in Trillium Park as well. So indigo is what jeans were traditionally. Now it's it's a fake indigo or a synthetic indigo, I guess is the word I'm supposed to use. But this is like true indigo grown and then dyed on my nettle waist threads. And so now I'm like, okay, a pair of nettle jeans that are dyed in indigo, how cool would that be, right?
That's what, 10 kilometers of fiber?
Probably about, at least,
That blows my mind. It just blows my mind to think in that coat, there's 5 kilometers of fiber. Another question from Kathy Lambert. Where and how can I get more? I'm not certain what you mean by more, Kathy.
Just more Sharon Kallis.
Oh, yes.
So, Kathy, I'm on Instagram, just as Sharon Kallis on Instagram. And EarthHand, I can type in here for everyone. EarthHand.com is the website for EarthHand Gleaners Society. So that's the organization that I started 8 years ago now and run our project through. And so a lot of the work that we do around community education and fiber education and just retooling how we think about what we can do in public parks, what are the plants that we're growing in public parks, what are our relationships with those plants, all of that becomes a part of kind of empathy building and awareness for why we need to protect the environment and how we can be engaged in our local place. Having plants as kin and being in relationship with plants and learning to build relationships that are respectful with our local host nations, whoever's land you're on and whoever's those nations are. what does that look like, and how can you be planting, native species that would have been traditionally the fiber shed of that region. So that's a part of what happens at Trillium in the plantings that we have there. Some of them are species that wouldn't have traditionally, like the dogbane or Indian hemp, I'm calling wild hemp, wouldn't have grown right here on the coast. It grew in the interior area, but it was a trade plant, so it would have been a trade species. So it was definitely used by the nations here and traded often with goat fiber, goat wool. So being able to have those plants, because of climate change, things that grew here before may not grow here well now. And looking forward, how can we have some of the species that are going to be really doing well in a dry, hot climate going forward? And some of those are fiber plants or dye plants, and they're all really fantastic pollinator plants. And it's, I think, one of the most subversive things I probably do is growing stinging nettle in a city park, and somehow, so far getting away with it. But I did have a couple of years ago now, just I guess 2019, spring 2019, there were a group of city officials, park board people that were wandering around the city taking a look at their various pollinator projects. And I sort of was just leaving and I saw a bunch of people standing with their clipboards. So I stopped to kind of see what was going on. And they told me they were just taking a look and checking in on how all of the pollinator projects were doing in the downtown east side. And we're so thrilled to announce that ours was doing the best, that Trillium area, they were so thrilled with how well the Trillium pollinator zone was doing and the species that were being identified there. And I just look at the nettle and it's like, well, it's the nettle. Like the nettle is just covered in ladybugs every spring. It's just, all over with butterflies in the summertime. So, building a fiber garden is also building a pollinator garden. And how are those interconnected with a dye garden as well?
And Sharon, you said, I wanted to double check this because I wrote it down because I thought I heard it right. And it was a line that I just loved, if indeed it is what I heard, which is, the plants are my teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's, this is where it's the same story as what, industrialization has cut all of us off from learning from our parents how to do things where we take care of ourselves, right? That like how we grow our own food or how we build our own shelters or make our own clothes. Some of these core things that at one point we would have been taught by our parents or our grandparents, and colonization and industrialization really ended that. And so we don't have the, you can only learn so much from books. If you don't have somebody that is, it's the plants that are showing you. So it's that having a sense of observation and spending time with the plants, and what does it smell like? What does it do? If I twist it this way, what happens? If I do that twist in 3 weeks time or 3 months time, what's that like? How is that different? And so, my work with nettle has been an ongoing learning journey since 2008 was my first project with nettle. And there's always steps where I fail and have kind of floundered, and those are where the hard learning happens. And then I have to kind of wait a year, and I'm taking what I've learned to the next season, the next year that season rolls around, and applying what I've learned, and bringing with me whatever I've learned from some of the other plants, and how do those pieces fit together and help me unpack the process for putting everything together to make really strong, useful spun line.
The whole thing of trial and error that really came out in Martin's video of a documentary of the process. I also remember years and years ago, this is back in the 70s, there's a book called Firefox, I think it's called, about folk traditions in in the eastern United States on the seaboard, in Virginia, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember one of the things that I read there was that when somebody made something, say they were making beer or bread, they would also always take one element and they would do it something slightly different, see what happened. So there was a learning process that was always there about trying something else.
Yeah.
Martin, I wanted to ask you the same question in terms of Sharon so brilliantly answered this whole question about plant being teaching. What was for you as a participant in this project, or sorry, my understanding of your relationship with Sharon is both as somebody who's involved in the work on the ground in the community, but also as a filmmaker. What has been your teachings that you've come away with from being involved in these processes?
Well, I think so much of it is time-based and a different cycle of time, because Sharon mentions it in the film a little bit about the whole idea of fast fashion and how we're being tempted to buy things every week and things are coming out constantly. But making a film like this, as filmmakers are used to coming in, documentary filmmakers, the type like me, it's called run and gun. It's get stuff as fast as you can and put it together. But in this particular case, it was 2 years. So it's really looking at a slower pace of actually gathering the information. And, luckily it's something that's really interesting to me. So, and it was something really close by. So I'm interested in covering what happens in the particular neighborhood I live in,
right,
and how people are, doing things that challenge the status quo of going to the mall. I mean, if nothing else, if you watch a film where you actually participate in one of Sharon's workshops, you're not shopping. And that's probably a pretty good thing. Because unfortunately, I think we've allowed consumerism to replace culture. It's, if to a large extent, that's people have been conditioned and lured and tempted by all sorts of useless junk that we don't want. In the first film I made with Sharon, the backdrop of the center and port is there. And I've been filming it a lot lately. These huge, big container ships, the ones that look like Lego, are coming in. And it's an extraordinary large amount of that is clothing. And it's coming from all sorts of things that we just really don't want to know about, like the way cotton is grown, the way that polyesters are made, even some things that were being sold as organic products like bamboo are actually being produced using terrible conditions for the workers and just in such excess that, back to your original question, for me, it's like slowing that process down, including the filmmaking process.
Right. And then you see the context in which this work is taking place in the larger context of everything that's going on, which ties me back.
I just have to add in, because Martin undersells himself on this. Like, yes, he's built our flax processing equipment, but also like Martin shows up to workshop and I will just hand him drop spindles and say, like, can you teach that person how to spin? Because Martin knows how to spin. Martin is a fantastic teacher for drop spindling and has actually, taken on being interested in this to go and meet a sheep and buy a fleece and wash the, raw wool and, extract the lanolin and gathering the walnuts in West Van and dyeing it, spinning it and making himself a vest. So, Martin's not just a filmmaker. He also has got his hands in the materials and, is now like you're mending sweaters, doing visible mending and kinds of other work as well. So there's lots of crossover.
I think something Sharon mentions a lot of times, just what she said there, but that didn't used to be unusual. Everybody did that.
Yeah.
And I come from very old-fashioned parents, so that was the norm for me. So building things and fixing things has never seemed unusual to me. But for a lot of people, I think we're really shortchanging a lot of young people by not showing them those things and not letting them really sort of appreciate the value of making things yourself. And that, buying crap at the mall is it's just not very satisfying. That's why it works to make people consumers, is that you get sick of what you bought and you have to buy something new. So this is kind of an attempt to short circuit that. And
my art practice really, when I think back to early days of graduating from art school and how I sort of decided to frame my work, was I didn't know what I wanted to do in my art practice, but I knew I did not want to be a commercial artist because I was a non-consumer myself. So framing my work in such a way where I was just kind of creating, sculptures, whatever, for a gallery type consumptive system didn't make sense. And with that in mind, going out and buying materials to start my creative process didn't make sense. And I didn't have the money. So I started looking at green waste piles and exploring what could be coming from a green waste pile, and that notion of enough of anything can be made into something. And the discovery of what that something was the exciting learning journey of being in relationship with this plant. And how do you bend? And do you crack? And at what point do you crack? And what happens if I bend you this way instead of that way? And so, those early forays into weaving is what really got me started, and was also a very an uplifting way of feeling liberated from having to buy materials in order to be creative, as somebody that was not having any money, being, very, very low income, and has been really kind of a big part of our work that now EartHand does, is just how do we connect people back to the land and show people how to use their hands and how to access materials without feeling like money needs to be a hurdle, that they don't have enough money to buy those supplies. It's like, well, what do you have in your world, and what is in, the green waste system as materials that are coming out at the end of the season? What can be done with those? How can you make with those? And what are those techniques? And that just immediately links back into all kinds of ancient and pre-culture traditional hand technologies. And there's something there that when we tap into that and teach people how to use their hands again, and how to weave, and how to be makers, and coming together to make together, that when we think about the climate crisis that we're in and the social crisis that we are up against, there's so much negativity of what needs to be changed, and it's overwhelming and it's exhausting. And when we can have something like this, that is a way that we are teaching ourselves new skills and connecting in with the environment, and it's something that makes us feel good and that we can share with others, it's like opening up this new, instead of it being glass half full or glass half empty, it's glass half full. It's like, look at the world that's waiting for you to dive into when you are not going to the store, when you're not worried about having to buy those things, but you put your time into making. And then who are the people that are sitting down making beside you, and what's their life story, and what are they all about, and how are you sharing with each other what you're learning and what you're making? So all of that starts to feel like a much more inspiring and uplifting way of changing our current system and changing our thinking about how we're living our lives and what how we're putting ourselves out in the world. And, and it's like one step in front of the other. I wouldn't be able to just start from nothing and make that nettle coat. It's because I've dabbled in pattern drafting, and I've dabbled in, all of these different areas that I'm able to bring all of those lessons together. But it's like any hike or any journey. It's one step and then the next step, and one step and then the next step, and just really enjoying each of those steps for the fun and the beauty and the excitement of what learning is in that moment.
Yeah, well said. And that was another aspect that, I haven't touched upon, or one aspect that you touched upon very briefly, was the social time of being with people out on the land. And it made me think of times with, in the old days when families would be in the kitchen and making pierogies and singing songs. And chatting and telling stories. And in this case, you're out on the land with other people and you're working your hands, but you also have that time to socialize and interact with people and to get that connectivity, not only with land and not only with, the artistic process, but also with other people. I've got a couple of comments coming in here. Helen S says, and that is exactly why he can document so well. He being you, Martin, knows the process intimately. That's a very good point, Helen, that she is saying that you did such a great job because you're familiar with the process, and as Sharon says, you had woven yourself into the fiber of the work.
I have to say, there's another part to that. It's my penance for the fact that all these things, and Sharon saying about the environment and slow clothing, and I'm using these highly newfangled devices to film it. So I feel a little bad about that. Video cameras and all this equipment is quite short-lived. It's a terrible, and the whole media thing, unfortunately, the whole internet is a hugely labor intense or energy intensive process. So I have to get out and get my hands on something real.
Right.
And not be doing this all the time. So
Right.
Thanks, Ellen.
And Kathy Lambert says, this is Kathy, I think in Southern California, time to go and feed the flocks. Bye, and thanks so much. This film and you are treasures.
Thanks, Kathy.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kathy.
And I wanted to close just by talking about something else that I think is really important. And Sharon, you commented on it at the top of the film, and you're such an incredible communicator, and you're able to put these really complex things into really kind of concise phrases that we can understand. And the phrase you used was something to the effect of, I like doing this work because it connects my ancestors to the ancestors of this land.
Yeah. Yeah, I think of stinging nettle as being my cultural medicine. It is a plant that has all kinds of medicinal properties in and of itself as a for our physical bodies. But when I think of this being a plant that my ancestors in Germany and in Wales and in Scotland were very much connected to and using in fiber and in medicine, and it's the Urtica doica grows here as well and has strong fiber traditions here and other use traditions. And so being able to have that as the bridge for me in working with people like Tracy Williams and Cease Weiss, Aquila Weiss, and Chantal Newman and Megan Inez. There's so many people, women from the Squamish Nation that have been really at my side in a lot of this work. That's been a really kind of key part in how I've been able to learn. And it's interesting because of both industrialization and colonization, we are separated by generations from having had grandmas or grandpas that would have taught us how to strip the fibers and how this was made versus how that was made. And so it becomes this backwards engineering of trying to understand, well, if this is the object that you're getting to, what decisions are you making in the process along the way? And so there's been lots of things there that become these just, kind of fun, nerdy challenges to figure out on, how tools, and, when you even look at drop spindles are universal. Pretty much every culture has a version, or I shouldn't say drop spindles. Spindles are universal. Pretty much every culture has a form of spindle. And then when you look at the different styles of spindles, whether it's a drop spindle or a Navajo spindle or a spindle that's supported. They are specific in size and weight and use, how you use them, to what was the fiber that you were spinning. And so what's the fiber that's attached to a particular place will fit the tool of that particular place. And that, of course, leads to the style of garment that was being made. And so those textile nuances become really lovely places for sharing and exchanging and learning alongside each other.
That's a beautiful place to end. I love those thoughts. Thank you so much. I admire your work so much, and I learned so much from your conversations. And congratulations on putting together such a beautiful documentary. I hope that you guys continue to work together and to do other projects. So the 10-year pants project, Martin, are you in on that?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Martin and I have got so many projects on the go that he's like, what am I filming this for again? And I have to just say, like, Martin he works like any artist. We work so hard for the stipend that we are paid. I don't know any other filmmaker that would be so gracious and generous with their time. And, it's in part because we live a few blocks apart here in the neighborhood, where I'll be like, hey, I'm going to be at the studio. If you want to come down to the park, I'm going to be outside. And Martin will be like, oh, what are you doing? Should I bring my camera? Is it something? So the ease of access to be able to work together. But I'm sure Martin, for a 20-minute film, he probably had 10 hours or more of shot footage to sort of edit down to 20 minutes. And I don't know, I swear somewhere he's keeping a blooper reel of all the times that I'm swearing and sounding stupid. So someday he's going to bribe me with that.
Well, that's really beautiful, and it speaks to the connection of people and community, and people working together to support each other in community on the land that they're connected to. And this is a really special project. One other further thought I wanted to ask, and it had to do with the question from, I think, Kathy Lambert, which is, how do I get more Sharon Kallis? I think you've also published a book, have you not, Sharon?
Thank you for reminding me, Terry. I'm so horrible at selling myself that. Yes. Look, I can hold it up.
And you can write the name in the chat and how they can get a hold of the book. So
that's the book. It's maybe backwards for you. It's called Weaving Community Through Collaborative Eco Art. And New Society Publishers, who's fantastic, put it out in 2014, I think it came out, but it was just turned into an audiobook. There are some pictures in it, so you'll lose those in an audio. But if anybody is interested in working with invasive species, if they're as weaving material, if they're interested in, like, what does it look like to take city land and turn that into a community commons for art materials, there's interviews with some park key people that have been involved from Park Board, and then lots of storytelling about some of the larger projects, as well as some kind of like entry-level weaving skill tutorials.
And if people want to get in touch with you through the website, is that the best way to get you?
Probably, yeah, the best way is through the website, earthhand.com. So it's like Earth and Hand, share the letter H. And I'm on Instagram as well. Just Sharon Kallis on Instagram.
So I got someone knocking at my door.
All right.
I think that means it really is time for me to go.
And I'm just going to correct you that it's not Sharon Kravitz. It's
oh my gosh. too many SKs in this world. Sharon Kallis.
They sound so similar.
Oh my gosh. I can't believe I did that. No, I can believe I did that.
All right.
Kimmy says, I didn't post that on Facebook. Thank you, Kimmy.
Okay. All right. Thank
you to Kimmit and all the technical people in the crew. And my apologies for arriving late. I thought this event was starting at 4 o'clock, and Kimmit sent me a note at 3 saying, we'll see you soon. Yeah, I'll see you soon. And that's interesting why he's getting to me so early. And then 3:30, it was, where are you, Terry? So my apologies for starting a little bit late. Thank you so much, Sharon Kallis, also known as Sharon Kravitz. Thank you, Sharon Kallis.
Right.
Thank you, Martin. And thank you so much for all the work that you're doing in our community. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you very much, everyone.
For joining us this afternoon. Bye.